All right, third time's definitely a charm. I definitely did it right. We're definitely recording the review this time, guys. Wombat Goes Deep number 8. Gonna be doing Far Cry 5. I want to call this a mini review. I'm not really going to be going into the graphics and the gameplay too much. I'm going to be focusing on the story, so I assume it's going to be a slightly shorter review. Um, and I might do some more of these to sort of focus on things. And hey, why not? So let's just dive into it. And check out the Patreon, et cetera, below the video. Okay, the review. Firstly, I want to just laugh about the fact that you see Dutch after the super generic intro scene, where you do the generic chase thing, and he's like, "Go fix it! I can't even get off this island." And then he talks to you on the radio a couple times, but he never comes back into the story whatsoever. Oh, spoilers are going to be throughout this, by the by. So if you don't like spoilers, don't listen to the review. But I'm going to get into the larger story criticism, and we're not necessarily going to walk through the story bit by bit. I'm just going to talk about stuff as I wrote notes for it. I think my biggest problem with the overall story in Far Cry 5 is that there are boring villains with lazy, by-the-numbers motivations as far as this sort of subgenre or story setting goes. The idea of conviction making them believe what they're doing is right, it's not a bad idea. It's actually a really great premise for a lot of great stories. The bad guy believing that what they're doing is righteous and good is a great place to start. It's a lot of ways it's a universal kind of idea. We all believe the stuff we believe with a certain amount of conviction. The problem is the setting and the sort of general overall tone of the game ends up making it comical and pointless for the most part, and the execution is really pretty shallow overall. So we'll start with John Seed because that's kind of where they strongly suggest you should go first. So I just basically followed through the game. You know what I mean? I never really try to break too much on that side of things. I always mess with it a little bit, but I'm playing through to get sort of the experience they wanted me to get, not necessarily to test the limits of the narrative structure, which I did do in a couple of places. Anyway, John Seed, the first guy you run into, he's basically a torture-obsessed would-be serial killer. There's really not a lot of meat to the guy whatsoever. It just walks through the same sort of crazy religion-inspired psycho tropes that not only does everyone else in this game have, but every sort of, religious cult psycho story ever has. It's very by the numbers. The idea of them being convinced of their religious message is sort of bland. Like, it really doesn't go through anything. You get tossed some exposition about John Seed from time to time about how, oh, he did this and he was a crazy guy and when he was a kid, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, okay, yeah. But like, what's the message really? And this isn't helped at all throughout the entirety of the game by the fact that there's absolutely no substance behind the cult other than extremely non-specific doomsday bullshit. There's literally nothing to sort of make John Seed a more interesting person to deal with. He really, of the three, is probably the worst, I'd say. And that's really, I mean, you're picking from three piles of crap and going, that one smells the worst in a lot of ways in this game. He's got just nothing to him. Like, he just says the same cooing stuff. He does this weird tampon commercial at the beginning of the game where he's like, try extra strength bullshit cult with no, meat whatsoever. It'll help on those heavy flow days or whatever. You know what I mean? There's really nothing other than that commercial that I even really remember about the guy meaningfully. He's got his little torture bunker. But it's the least sort of descript of all the torture bunkers, of all the bunkers that the three siblings have before you go fight Dickface, whatever his name is, Joseph, later on. It's so, yeah, John suffers from being easily the most forgettable of the bunch he's, I guess, he's basically your kind of poor man's Joseph Seed, and there's really nothing super interesting about the guy. It's hard to really have a strong opinion on him other than the fact that he would have been a serial killer, so he tortures people, and that's his whole thing. It's super common. It's not even an uncommon character inside Ubisoft games. So to that end, I'm really kind of sad there. And like I said, one of the things that makes me sad about this, and I'll talk a little bit more about this towards the end when I talk about what they could have fixed up, is it makes me very sad that he never has any substance. Like, the cult lacks substance. So John Seed is just a guy who tortures people and goes, if you just believed, you're going to be punished for, because you have to be made, purified or whatever. And then he cuts off a chunk of somebody's skin and staples it to a wall, which is crazy. But again, he's just a serial killer that they've dumped into this cult setting without really any rhyme or reason, because the cult's not well fleshed out. He's not well fleshed out as a character. Everybody's kind of their one trope that they repeat over and over again. And this is a really deep problem throughout the rest of the game that it's probably going to come up over the course of this review. But keep that in mind. The cult has no real meaningful stuff whatsoever. And they try to just throw generic phrases at you from time to time to get you to kind of go along with that there's a thing. That problem immediately crops up again once you're done with John Seed's area. You go over to Faith's area. Faith she drugs people. That's the basic idea there, and convinces them to go do whatever she wants. That said, there's the Faith jump is forced. There's no opting out of it. There's no way around it. You can't wait out the effects of the bliss or whatever. And forcing players to do a thing that's fixed, it's not gameplay. Like, forcing me to do a leap of faith because she got mind control over me somehow, it's not gameplay. It's just I watch a 5-minute cutscene, and then they give me control to force me to jump off a cliff and then put me back in a cutscene. Just make the whole thing a cutscene. There's no point in making me slow walk off the edge of a building when I don't want to, and having her repeat literally the same 2 lines over and over again. Another thing that was great there is that when you come into, basically you get these little cutscenes when you first come into an area after you've done a couple things, and then after you fill up bars to certain points. For me, you have to jump off the giant statue of Joseph that's in the county, and I had already completely destroyed the statue. It's literally the first thing I did after freeing the prison and getting missions. They're like, that statue is a damn eyesore. I'm like, cool, I'm on board with that. So I went up there with the helicopter and blew the fucker up. Then I walked to the top of it. Literally, there was nothing left of the statue. So the jump happened after the statue, and it was whole. Like, the cutscene didn't take it into account. I jumped from a whole statue. I live for some reason that they literally never explain. Like, literally, I jump off of a statue that's hundreds of feet in the air, and I live. And apparently that's something, I don't know. Like, there are these vague undertones of unexplained things that just, well, not even undertones. Unexplained things happen constantly, and there's a sort of vague undertone of magic, and you're special throughout the whole thing, but it never really comes to the fore. You look at a game like Far Cry 3, where that very much becomes a part of the game, whether it's just through, again, through hallucinogenics or whatever, raising dragon gods. Like, that really comes to the forefront. I want to say it did a little bit in Far Cry 4 as well. Whereas here, there is never anything inexplicably magic. They sort of hint that maybe Joseph has, like, mind control powers over Nancy, that lady at the beginning, and that's how he convinces people. Like, she talked like she was being mind controlled, but he never really mind controls you or anybody else, and then it's all kind of explained by drugs and torture, and that's how they get people. So it's very weird on that. Like, the game's tone and themes aren't well established. They're never well explained, and there aren't good reasons for anything, because magic never really comes to the forefront, right? You just have all this stuff like the bliss capturing you from anywhere with no excuse. But we'll get into that a little bit later too, because that's just bad gameplay design that comes up. But, like I said, we're not going to do a whole gameplay section. When you blow up the statue, and one other time I want to say in the game, she plays the victim angle, like, do you know what he's going to do to me? Literally single line, do you know what he's going to do to me? And then later there's another single line like, Joseph, blah, 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 this and that. And it's like, oh, I guess that's an attempt at depth. Like, that's an attempt to sort of explain that she's scared of him. But for the most part, she literally just rolls out the bullshit for him. You know what I mean? Like, she does whatever she wants, and she seems to be pretty happy with it and pretty convinced that this cult is the right way to go. But like I said, for 2 lines, I don't know if that's meant to deceive me, to make me think twice about what I'm doing, but she's the only one that ever does it. So it's a bit of a weird writing tick for these people that literally control areas that she, like, eh. Like, honestly, Faith's section, and this is, I guess, a little bit more true on Jacob's side. Faith's section, even though John Seed is bland and boring, Faith it's even less character focused on Faith. Like, John Seed's section is about John Seed. He's a boring character, but the cutscenes and your interactions are about him. Faith's section is about more the other people in the cult. You see a lot of sort of your marshal guy that obviously was going to die the entire time. Come on, he abandons you in the helicopter. It was the only future for him. Yeah, it's just like, she's not particularly interesting in her little cutscenes, and her little cutscenes feature her less than other things, and they're also just cutscenes. Every single time you get one of these forced little cutscenes with her, you just end up in the bliss or whatever, and it's just this forced vulnerability. It has nothing to do with me failing, though I fail in the cutscenes. I fail to beat people up. I fail to do stuff. Yeah, just awkward. We'll get into a little bit more. Companions have post-kill lines that play before I've killed the local boss, which was pretty nice. That happened a few times with, what's her name? The angry chick with the bow, who's so forgettable. I don't even remember her name at this point. Companions also just spout exposition at you. I don't remember if I had a thing about that later on, but that's just what I'm going to throw out there. Literally every person you meet will literally just go, back in my day, and I remember complaining about this for Kingdom Come Deliverance. Like, having characters spout their life story at you when you first meet them is not a substitute for character depth or development. You can't just do that. It's not how it works. It's not how writing works. Ubisoft, take notes. The Faith scene, moving back to Faith, the Faith scene where you save the marshal is failable if you don't follow him through the mist, or through the bliss. If you don't walk along with him, you fail, which is desperately annoying because, again, you have no choice. I am not drugged. I am a player with agency, and you're taking the agency away to force your really crap artistic vision on me to that end. So pretty annoying on that front. Did not enjoy that, and hope that they stop doing that. And this is an annoying part about the entire section, and really one of the sections later, we'll talk about Jacob as well. This didn't happen as much in John Seed's area, and maybe it did. I just didn't play it right at the time, but I was literally teleported into the bliss and somehow find the marshal. I should have been, legitimately found him. Like, the real marshal in real life. I should have been nowhere near where he was being kept, since I passed out from the bliss in an encampment I'd liberated. That's not where he was being kept. He was being kept somewhere else. And it literally never explains the bliss as far as I can tell. I get that it's supposed to be a hallucinogenic state, and I pass out, and then I just wake up and whatever. And it's like, so did I pass out and then wander in a blackout state until I kind of woke up in Bliss World right next to the marshal somehow? Did they come get me when I was passed out in a field and come put me next to the marshal for some reason? That doesn't seem like a great way to brainwash me, by showing me a guy that's gone insane to kind of help ground me in how fucked up this is. Like, even from a writing standpoint, that's a bad idea. It's never explained. It's really, really frustrating because there's other stuff. Like, I hear communication from this chick, like actual words from her. I see things I am not present for, and there's no explanation ever. Virgil is the perfect example of this quirky sort of character who gets killed, right? And I watched that happen. I watched the marshal shoot Virgil, and I'm not there. Literally, I see it happen. That's really what happened in the game. And then when I come out of the bliss, I'm outside. And nobody's like, what were you doing? Why didn't you stop him? And then why'd you walk outside? None of that's ever explained. Like, it's never even hinted at how I saw that or how I got that. It's never explained in World. But Virgil is a great example of as well, of the quirky-ish, detailed back character issue. He hands out buttons. That's a little quirk that they came up with for their improv class or whatever when they were making up characters. His family's been killed by Faith and her drugs. And you get told this in literally single lines of dialogue, one after another. And then he offers you a button once ever, and then occasionally you see him offer one other person a button or mention a button like 2 or 3 other times, and it's supposed to be a character trait, but it's shallow. And then, like you said, the first thing he says when you walk up to him is, hey, could you go shut down this drug hey, I'm glad you came. There's this drug den on the other side of town. They killed my wife and my kids. Doesn't even sound that upset about it. He's got his buttons now, I guess. And it's just one of these frustrating things where there's absolutely no depth whatsoever to the thing. You just walk up to him and he goes, hey, go over to this thing and shut it down, please. They killed my wife and kid. And you're like, okay, am I supposed to give a shit about the guy? Like, it feels like they wrote this massive, massive backstory for these characters and just they had no idea how to get it in because they're like, we're not going to do character development for like 50 characters, so it's like a mile wide and an inch deep, the entire game's story. Like the premise, it's all wide reaching, and there's these ideas like the bliss and mind control and fucking all kinds of stuff, and a doomsday cult. And you're supposed to literally, if you look at Ubisoft developers talk about it, you were supposed to sit around and listen to the radio to learn about the backstory of the game. And like I said, Virgil's just a really great little, in a nutshell, version of how everything is just, it's thrown at you like spaghetti at a wall. And they're just like, God, oh, I hope some of this sticks. Or maybe they just are aware that it's another Far Cry game and I'm not actually supposed to give a shit. But I remember Far Cry 3 legitimately struggling with what to do because my girlfriend, my friends, the situation was reasonable and I cared. They were my friends, and not only were they established as that early in the game, they were established as that in an ongoing way. I didn't just save them because that's my job. But again, we'll get into that a little bit later towards the end of the review. I want to rant about it now, and I'm trying to resist so that I can go through the notes that I have. Just please. So anyway, Virgil gets killed by the marshal. Pardon. And they play sad music when he dies, right? And Tracy, whoever the fuck Tracy is sad about it. Literally, I was never introduced to Tracy whatsoever as like a character. Maybe I was supposed to be. Maybe I went in through the wrong door when I showed up to the prison. But she's just supposed to be a badass, like literally every other female character in the game. And honestly, every other dude in the game for the most part. Like everybody's just a secret badass that was doing nothing and somehow not winning until I showed up, I guess. But anyway, Tracy the badass apologizes for being curt to me when I first meet, like after I liberate the prison in Faith's area. All right, is that in Faith's area? Yeah, it's Faith's area, right? Okay, anyway, it doesn't matter. Moving on. But I liberate the prison, and yeah, it's Faith's area. And she goes, I'm sorry for being so short with you earlier. That's just how I am, me being a badass like I am. I mean, basically verbatim what she says. I didn't write the whole thing down. I never heard her say anything during the initial taking of the prison. So she apologizes to me for being such a brusque badass. I never heard her say a fucking word. It's great. Like, I'm just supposed to care who she is and how who her character. They're trying to get it across so quickly. So I feel like maybe I missed some stuff, but the more I played, the more it just kept happening. This kind of shit where people talk to you like they're established characters who I'm supposed to give a shit about. It just keeps happening. And so eventually I kind of realized like, oh, it's just bad. They didn't actually do any of this work, but they think that because we showed up to play the game, I'm supposed to, I'm supposed to just care. Like, oh right, yeah, I'm saving her. I'm totally on board with this. 100%. Perfect. It's fine. It's fine. Yeah, a minor gameplay gripe, sort of major one actually. I accidentally swapped my main sniper rifle right before a final forced quest chain for Faith, and I couldn't get it back. Um, so I had to play those mission chunks without it. Mildly annoying, but I'm going to call it annoying because you can't just keep a rotation of one of each kind. You have 4 weapon slots once you get everything unlocked. I think at the time I had 3, like 2 in my pistol slot. And it it just was very annoying. So I ended up with the basically the AR that you have. I had that, my fully kitted out one, and then I had a completely, no attachments whatsoever AR as well. Deeply annoying, but I guess that's on me. Like I accidentally swapped it out, and I didn't notice until I was already in the Faith quest line. So there's no way to go back out of that and go to a shop. If I quit and load a save, it loads me back into the Faith quest line story chunk that's forced, and there was no way to go get a gun that would have been fairly useful. But yeah, like it's the second time that Faith tries to act like a victim is in the final boss fight against her, where she is, as far as I can tell, very literally floating around and shooting magic fireballs at you and shit. Which again, am I just hallucinating that? Is that some sort of a metaphor for my thing? I don't know. But she literally says one line about being a victim and how he tricked me, he applied me with drugs or whatever, and then immediately she's back to normal. You know what I mean? Like literally 2 lines out of my entire time in her part of the county, it instantly back to normal both times. Just weird, bad. I don't know how those lines, if they were supposed to be in, if they were going to drop that angle, and somehow those lines just made it through. I don't really know. Maybe there was a more complex character earlier on, and Ubisoft just went put the fucking thing out. Whatever. A side note at this point that I do just want to put in there, because this is where it is in my notes. If I hear the song Amazing Grace one more time, I'm going to burn down an orphanage. I'm so sick of that fucking song after playing this game. Holy shit. It was in a different game I was playing recently, and it pissed me off. Like, when I hear Amazing Grace, I just get fucking annoyed. It's like they think that's the only Christian song ever in the history of time, guys. If you're going to write a weirdo Christian doomsday cult, look up a second fucking song for them to sing. Maybe. Just a thought. Capture parties for Jacob are on a hard timer. It's a kind of the same, I assume, with Faith. Actually, with Faith, you just kind of pass out wherever you are, which is slightly less annoying. With Jacob, he sends capture parties after you. He's like, "I'm gonna get you." It says you're being hunted. So I was like, "Fuck it. I'm gonna hard camp, right? Like I'm gonna get myself set up." I got myself set up in a nice spot. It happened a couple other times as well. It happened one time in a helicopter, but the first time I just set up. I was like, I'm going to set myself up at a hard point. I killed a set of hunters and then got pulled in, right? So I was like, okay, maybe I got hit from somewhere. Like maybe one jumped in behind me, or they just had them shoot through a thing. That was weird. Maybe I got popped. So the next time I knew it was coming up. I knew it said I was about to get hunted. I was near a helicopter. I fast traveled to a helicopter spot, got in a helicopter, just went up in the air, straight up into the sky. Sitting in a helicopter, it literally just timed out. Like nothing happened. I never got shot at once. I got captured by the hunter party, I guess, and my helicopter ran out of fuel. I don't know. Just it faded to black. And there I was in Jacob's little, sleeper agent training dungeon. The Jacob Seed part is in large part a rehash of the Faith part in almost every way, except he's about war and she's kind of about love. Like, I don't know if that's intentional, and that's why John Seed's so bland, is because they kind of had the themes there. They sort of very loosely tied in a Seven Deadly Sins thing to John, but again, really bland standard Christian Psycho stuff there. Really nothing exciting. But yeah, with Jacob, it's about, he likes war and wrath and whatever. It, I'll say by this point in the game, by the time I got up to Jacob's part, I was super tired of monologuing. The entire game feels like monologuing. An unvoiced protagonist is fine, and that's what they went with. There's no dialogue options, and people just drone on forever when they talk to you. Legitimately, I started skipping side quest discussions, talks, because every single one of them ran on for, and this is not a joke, a minimum of 60 to 90 seconds. That is the shortest you are going to be talking to somebody. They're going to tell you their life story. Then they're going to tell you they need you to go get 6 sandwiches from the sandwich hole. You go to, and then they're going to tell you why they need 6 sandwiches and how the sandwiches ended up in the sandwich hole and why they have a sandwich hole to begin with. And then you can finally go get the fucking sandwiches, and then you'll come back and they'll start waxing lyrical about fucking sandwiches, like that develops them as a character when they're just a person you do a single side quest for, literally never see again, and you can kill them after you've completed the side quest anyway. So I got so sick of the fucking monologuing. If you're going to have a silent protagonist, fucking put dialogue options in. Then it literally just feels like people, if you don't do that, okay, it's buh. You know what I mean? And at no point does the game stop being by the numbers, right? Even when there's like a mind control sub boss, right? Super wasted opportunity on that front. It's so frustrating playing through this fucking game because, like I said, everybody monologues at you because you can't talk and you don't talk, and nobody ever really brings it up. You know what I mean? Which is fine, because obviously at this point, making a joke about the fact that you have a silent protagonist is stupid. It's been done a million times. Fucking Grand Theft Auto Online can't stop doing it. So frustrating there. The mind control sub boss thing for Jacob. Basically, he's training you to be a sleeper agent to do stuff when you hear a certain song, and as a result, nothing really. Nothing. They just try to plop that stuff at you. But we'll get back to that, I think, in a second. Or we kind of add it. No, that's pretty much the end of Jacob's stuff, and now I'm into more general stuff on the other end of this. But yeah, so Jacob Seed's whole thing is basically just he puts you in a thing, and then in a forced sequence that could not be more transparent, you figure this out maybe the first or second time you run through his little kill maze. Like, you kind of realize, like, oh, I'm running through a kill maze so that later he'll play his stupid trigger song. I'll run through the kill maze, and then I'll kill the leader of the resistance. The resistance, who up until this point, you literally had nothing. You've never met any of them. They haven't been established as a force in the valley because they wanted every little area to kind of be its own little area with their own disparate fighting forces. Possibly for realism purposes, like, oh, they wouldn't have organized this much in that amount of time. So you run through the bunker, you kill the boss guy, and then they're mad at you, and they're like, now you got to go kill him because we're so mad. And then you kill him, and it's stupid. It's like you said, it's just super by the numbers. Nothing is surprising. The things that you see are so predictable in the way that they're going to come out the other end. It's obnoxious. So, you know what I mean? Like, I got to the end of the little kill zone thing. I looked at the guy, and I just stood there, and it won't let you leave. You literally can't leave. Nothing happens. Nobody comes to kill you. You don't start losing health. You don't have like a migraine, and the game takes control away from you. They force you to shoot the leader of the resistance. They 100% force it. And then you shoot him, and then everybody's mad at you because how could you do that? Like, it's like, but again, I'm a player with agency. I shouldn't have had to do that. And if you're gonna make me do it, take control away, right? You know what I mean? Do something about it. Make it a character moment. Have him sort of cooing in your ear like, hey, you want to kill him, don't you? And see his kind of hand, like we could hallucinate his hand coming around to pull the trigger for us so that we're in sort of a state of denial about how it actually happened. There's so many better ways to handle it, but at no point did they try to make it interesting. They just make it, let's walk down the street, let's do the same shit over and over again, by the numbers. You know what I mean? And this is another spot where these characters try to come off as though I'm supposed to give a shit about them. I've seen them for 2 seconds, either in the opening doing generic cop stuff, like the guy that you save here in Jacob's thing, like he apologizes for doing stuff to you, and it's and then there's the resistance people who you've literally never met before, and they don't really bother to explain who they are or why you should give a shit. You literally just start doing missions for them instantaneously. But yeah, the guy from the police force, like they call them your friends multiple times, but I don't know them. I don't know who they are. You know what I mean? It's weird. It's like upsetting. Like, again, it's like somebody came up with backstories for these characters, and they either try super hard to shoehorn that in, or they just tell you, you know, like they either try to like smash it in this way, or they try to just tell you you're friends with them. Like they just tell you you're friends with the people that are also U.S. Marshals or the local sheriff's department. And I'm like, I don't know these people. They were in the opening cutscene for 12 seconds, and I didn't see them again. But they keep calling them your friends and stuff. And you don't have any real moments with any of these characters. You never actually do character development with them. You don't have cutscenes where you talk to them or you struggle through stuff, or, you know what I mean? Like, just have a story mission where I take me and this guy and then we do something together. And then at the end, we're both like, woo, that was hard. You know what I mean? Thanks, man. I'm really counting on you, blah, 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 whatever. You know what I mean? It's annoying. Most of the people you can bring around with you aren't particularly funny. The lines are pretty stilted and jokey. Like, most of it's sort of humor that's sort of like, rural stuff. You know what I mean? There's a lot of that. There's a moody teenager who's the only... I mean, everybody's kind of ugly in the game. I shouldn't say kind of ugly. Everybody's horribly ugly. In the game, and there's some reasons for that. Like there's some deeper problems underpinning the whole thing. I know this is, like I said, it's kind of less structured than my normal reviews, so my notes weren't exactly in that direction. I need to order these notes slightly better in the future, but it's fine. Leave me alone. I just wanted to do a quick one, right? Quick. We're at 32 minutes. Super quick review. So I'm gonna stop vaguely talking about the entire story. Like these were always just supposed to be me rambling about games. Because I want to talk about the story now, and I want to talk about the deeper problems with the story as opposed to specific issues I had going through the game, which is what most of the other notes are. One, it is an unauthentic setting, and it makes no real attempt at being authentic. If you set a game in Tokyo and it was just this sort of, you know, multicolored menagerie, sure, but this is set 2 hours outside of Missoula, Montana. So it's a bit of a weird thing for it to be literally like equal parts white, black, Asian, and Hispanic people. Like I'd like to have seen a setting that rang truer, but this is just a generic, like they wanted to tell their story here, and so they set it in Montana, and then they put whoever in there. I'll say this, everybody gets equal treatment. It's not like anybody was sort of propped up, but the setting doesn't ring as authentic. It's just kind of too all over the place as far as who shows up and what they look like, and so on and so forth. Nobody really strikes me as like, yeah, that's been my understanding of what people from Montana are like. It's just people randomly slapped into the setting with no real rhyme or reason. There are a couple of good people, like the guy that does the Testicle Festival thing. That guy was pretty good. There might be some people that ring truer for people from Montana. Maybe Dutch does, but Dutch isn't really so much a character. But that problem it's sort of a core problem with the setting being different from what's being presented. Like what my expectation of Montana is different from what's presented, and as a result, I fail to connect with the setting in a meaningful way, which is perfectly fine. There are a lot of ways that they still could have had the sort of racial makeup they wanted without moving it out of Montana, but there was no attempt at that. It's just these people all live here, and that's just how it is. And maybe somebody's going to correct me on that, and that 2 hours outside Missoula there is a like 4-race 25% each racial harmony town that I'm just not aware of. But the demographics in Montana, there should be a lot more native people than you see. I think there's like a couple of native people. I feel like maybe they just wouldn't get involved. That's a fair statement. But I mean, again, no real attempt at authenticity in the setting, which disconnects you from the setting and then the story as a larger point, because you kind of go, well, this doesn't really look right, and then you kind of push it aside and go, that's fine, even though they keep making references to Montana. I'm just going to pretend that this is happening in every town USA, and that's fine. For me, that's not what I did. I kind of tried to, and it was in my head a little bit, and it just kind of added on to the following problems that are also in there. There are no stakes whatsoever, so absolutely nothing lands. The stakes for me as a player, I'm a rookie who has been sent here to arrest a man who leads a nightmare cult, and rather than just driving out of the county, I am now waging a one-man war with the locals against this cult. At no point do I make a larger attempt to call in any help. The argument for why the National Guard doesn't show up, according to Ubisoft, is, the world was on the brink of thermonuclear war, so nobody cares about this cult. Stupid. But yeah, there are no stakes. I don't know who these people are. This isn't my town. Nothing. There is no reason. You are literally a stranger who just joined the full, even by the story's own rules. Even by the story, even by the story's own fucking rules, I have no stakes whatsoever in this town. I'm a rookie. I don't know the people I'm working with that well. I don't give a fuck about Missoula, Montana. Or not even Missoula. I mean, it's a great town, but in the game, I have no reason to care about these little towns I'm in. I don't know any of these people. I guess I'm just a really good Samaritan, and that's the premise. But if you're going to try to write a detailed story to go along with your open world run around and shoot shit game, you have to give me a reason to care. Far Cry 3 did this fantastically, and we'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. I'll say that this lack of stakes and the rush stuff and the inauthentic setting, the inauthentic setting's likely due to just sort of the modern standards and requirements of Ubisoft and their sort of French-Canadian dictum on what you're supposed to put into video games. Now, that's sort of a political argument that I don't want to get into, but if you're going to do that, do it well. But yeah, it's a real problem. It's a real problem. So as we're running up to this, I'm going to say, just before I move on, it could be an effect of having to make them one after another. You have to make Far Cry after you make Assassin's Creed Origins, and you can obviously see all of the tech that got shared across things. This uses Wildlands bullet drop system and recoil system. It feels like just dropped in almost exactly. So there's a lot of tech sharing going on inside Ubisoft, which helps them crank these games out. But you'd think that would leave them a little bit more time to develop characters and build that content, but that's probably expensive, so they don't do it, right? That's my guess. I don't 100% know how the teams are split over there, but there's plenty of time between Far Cry games, less overall time between Ubisoft's junk releases one after another, so I think that these teams are getting juggled around a lot, even though Ubisoft hires a lot of people. I'm going to hop back to the game story real quick. They animated Snot in Joseph Seed's final little interlude scene, and it's the funniest thing I've ever seen in my fucking life. he's just like upset and snot is literally flying around out of his nose and slaps him. And I'm like, is this supposed to be funny? Because the game is taking itself dead seriously. Like, I think the game wants me to really be like, oh, wow, this guy's really flipping out. What a crazy guy. But I see snot coming out of a grown man's nose while he flips out and then sucks it back up. And it's like, is it supposed to be funny? I was so confused whether that was supposed to be funny or not. Because again, the entire game takes itself seriously. There's torture and murder, and your friends are all scared and crying when they get, beat up and fucked with. And it's just like, I don't understand. I don't understand what the tone of this game is. It's all over the place. And let's talk about the ending. So it turns out he actually was magic the whole time. Joseph Seed's magic, and he magically predicted a nuclear holocaust. And for some reason, they dropped 4 nuclear bombs on Montana, not Missoula, on the rural area you happen to be in. Every single one of them, the shockwave hits you within a matter of seconds. So they did not bomb Missoula, Montana. They bombed you in the middle of nowhere for some reason. I don't know if that's just sort of suggesting that there's like 1,500 nukes, so they'd bomb everywhere. And I don't think that maybe people understand how large the United States is. But yeah, if you had 1,500 nukes, you could put like one every 2 miles in a straight line across a single strip of the country. I doubt they would waste any nuclear weapons on Missoula, let alone rural Montana 2 hours away from Missoula. For some reason, 4 nukes landed there. Maybe there's something on the radio about there being nuclear silos, and that's part of the preemptive strike procedure to try to hit those silos or something. Shit, man, I don't know. There's a bunch of fallout shelters in the area. I know that. That's weird. But I guess people just like bunkers. I guess he did take over bunkers, but I feel like the government probably would have started paying attention to this cult if they took over nuclear bunkers before the nuclear holocaust started. That's probably something you'd want to send some guys in there to, stop if they're government nuclear bunkers. But I don't, you know what I mean? I don't know about what the government's up to these days. So maybe it's just they didn't have the time. It's a weird allocation of resources as far as nuclear holocausts go. But yeah, so he predicted the nuclear holocaust, and he was right. And that's the entire joke. Like, that's the entire thing. They just dropped this ending on you where, hey, you know how this guy was predicting the collapse of society? You might not have understood that that's what he was doing, because if you didn't read every single piece of paper in the entire game, nobody talks about the cult's beliefs or assumptions. And I will say this, as I've said before in other game reviews, if it is not in the part of the game that I play, if I have to read something, it is not story inside of the game. Okay? That stuff has, you can't just trust that I walked around to every shack to find the notes left behind and read those, so I'm going to care who these people are. Okay, I'm not the biggest fan of your game on my first playthrough. I might go back and read that stuff later if your fucking world is amazing, but even then, probably not. There are a lot of books in Skyrim I have never so much as opened. Except to get credit for having opened it so that it stops glowing with the add-on I use. But, so yeah, he predicts a nuclear holocaust, somehow survives, drags you into a bunker with him, and now you live in the nuclear holocaust with Joseph Seed. I don't think you brought any food in, so you're going to starve to death, but, that's fine. I think you end up back in Dutch's bunker, maybe. Yeah, it's just a real fuck you kind of ending. And, yeah. Weird. So that's the ending. The ending is a real botched bag of trash. There is a bad ending to the game where you can just leave him alone. You're sort of given the choice at the end to just walk away with your friends. And you can, haha. But if you do, haha, he plays the song that Jacob burned into your brain and makes you kill them. You kill everybody. Or at least that's the implication. But again, the game suffers from a lot. We spend nearly no time getting to know anybody. It's basically, I'd say it's a masterclass in how to do an awful version of Far Cry 3, complete with unnecessary close-ups on the main antagonist's face repeatedly. Um, so yeah, Far Cry 3, since this is going to be kind of my conclusions to the whole thing, Far Cry 3 had a simple premise, which helps. Your vacation gets ruined and your friends get kidnapped as you get wrapped up in sort of the drug woes of this local island that you got warned not to go to. It's not an original premise, but it's extremely well done. It gives you a reason to join the locals' fight because your friends have been kidnapped, and so you kind of go, okay, well, I care about getting them back, and that's all I'm really worried about. And your character even states as much. And then as he goes along, your character kind of finds out that, hey, maybe this is a thing I like. Maybe I like riding around in a jungle and living like a crazy wild man and shooting people I don't know. Maybe that's what he wants to do. But even then, like, that's about your character. You're coming along for a ride with a character. In this game, you never say anything, so people monologue at you. So there's not a character for you to get behind, and your decisions aren't respected by the game, which would be fine if there was a character, because we could slightly divorce ourselves from it, even though we're still kind of in control of that character's decisions in life. It'd work. That's what Far Cry 3 did, and that's what Far Cry 5 fails to do. You have a reason to care in Far Cry 3. Your friends and family speak, they care about you, you talk back, and we establish that you care about them. It lets you, instead of just being the main character, but yet being voiceless and having no ability to do stuff that you want to, you are a set character, and he's developed as you go along. So when things don't necessarily work out, we can kind of divorce ourselves from that or try to relate to it through him, as opposed to just thinking of it as being, that's not what I would do. So big mistake to go unvoiced protagonist in Far Cry 5. I don't know if that was put in to let you pick a person, like you could pick a gender at the beginning of the thing. Maybe that's what that was about, but everybody's ugly, so there's really no joy in being anybody in that game, because your choices are be an ugly dude or be an ugly chick. Comparing Far Cry 3 to Far Cry 5, it's frustrating. Far Cry 5 just keeps calling these people my friends. They never were. They're never established as your friends. The fucking marshal who I'm supposed to save abandoned me no less than 3 fucking times to die without ever making an attempt to save me. My only driving goal throughout the game, and Ubisoft needs to understand this going forward in the Far Cry games, my only driving goal, because of the way they set it up, both in a story and gameplay manner, was the game stated goal of stopping Joseph Seed. All right? That was it. That was my entire goal throughout the entire game. I did not care about anyone. I didn't talk to anybody. They just monologued at me and then told me to go do stuff, so they barked orders at me. So I just wanted to kill Joseph Seed. That's all I wanted to do. Literally it. You know what I mean? Frustrating. But here's the thing. I like to leave these sorts of reviews with something, you know what I mean, about how it could have been done properly, since complaining isn't enough. And I know this has been a rambly review. I'm sorry. I feel like they could have fixed it by making him own up to the shit his family's doing, but say he believes it's necessary. Like they didn't step close enough to humanizing Joseph and trying to make you understand, like genuinely be understanding about the fact that this is terrible. Jacob is terrible, but you got to understand there's a nuclear holocaust coming. The collapse of society is coming. He can make you listen to radio. Like, they take your control away and stick you in a chair, make you listen, have him preach to you. All right. And then you can still disagree with how he's going about his goals, because you're going to assume he's insane. You know what I mean? You're going to go, yeah, he thinks there's a nuclear holocaust coming. Of course, we're not going to go along with whatever this guy wants. But it gives you a reason, right, to give a shit about what he's doing. Have him go, yeah, Faith is, I'm putting her to use, trying to save as many people as possible. That's what we're doing. But instead, he's just this scripture quoting cliche who literally quotes the most commonly quoted Bible verses and things like that. And he just happens to want everyone to know about his sweet abs. That's an important thing. He can't be wearing a shirt. So again, if you had made maybe Joseph a little bit older, or don't, but at least have him explain to you, like, yes, John is crazy, but getting people to understand is more important than anything else. The ends will justify the means. You just have to come with me on this. It's about faith. You could tie all that together, make him be an understanding character, but instead he just comes around and says vague woo-woo shit at you every time you get caught up. And that's literally all you'd need to change. The game would stand up a lot better in its own way if you have these seeming insane people that you don't really connect with, that you don't really understand why they're doing what they're doing in the Seed family. And then on the other side, there's a bunch of strangers. So it's really a great way to sort of get you to go in with the antagonist a little bit. Like, yes, I want to save people because torture's bad no matter what. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want that to be what we're doing. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So, good. We'll do that. We'll save everybody. I'm choosing to kind of go that way. And it's easy to keep you going that way, right? But you can internally be struggling with it. Then, you know, like I said, it's apologizing for these guys. So you don't really have to change how they're written. You don't necessarily have to develop the side characters anymore, because them not being super relatable is okay. They're NPCs, and you're playing them as NPCs, and you're using that to develop your story. But they don't do that. Instead, Joseph is just a cliche like all the rest of his family, and at no point does he attempt to humanize himself. But I think that's what the game wanted to do. I think the game wanted to have you sympathize a little bit with Joseph and how he was right. But instead, he just comes off like a crazy dude the whole time. If he was completely well put together and everybody around him was crazy, you'd go, well, what's going on here? Some of this doesn't add up. But instead, it just does add up. They're all crazy. And then at the end, surprise, surprise, he was right and he wasn't crazy. And it's like, but it never does that. Like, the writing is so bad on that side of things that it's ruined. But they could have just written Joseph more aptly. They could have had him explain himself properly, and then you'd be on side, right? Sadly, they didn't do that, and you end up with a Far Cry game that is just another one down the slope, towards the bottom. I want to say they peaked. Far Cry 2 was good in a lot of ways, but I think Far Cry 3 was probably the peak, and for a lot of other people as well. Far Cry 3 is why Far Cry 4 got cranked out. It's why Far Cry 5 got cranked out. Not because of any sort of massive interest in telling an in-depth open world story with a large, criminal boss. Everything's really by the numbers gameplay wise for these sorts of games. Go to place, defeat boss of place, go somewhere else. It's Wildlands in first person with less to do and a slightly better story than Wildlands. But at least Wildlands goes, yeah, I don't really have a good reason to give a shit about anything here. I'm an operative brought in from elsewhere. Whatever. It's whatever. I don't know. Far Cry 5 is pretty bad. It's pretty bad. The gameplay's fine. The minute-to-minute gameplay's fun. But I don't know, man. The story is boring. You get monologued at. Everything is handled. Everything felt like work. Everything was pretty joyless. I never really caught myself having fun. The firefights were not fun, but maybe entertaining is a word. You can hop in a truck, and if you pass enemies, they will just follow you and try to murder you. It's just what they do, so that's pretty annoying. There were some comedic moments with running over random wildlife and things like that, but all in all, just a really, really unexciting game. I don't know. Let's see. It had graphics don't even reflect score at this point. There's basically a basic for AAA that they hit. So I guess, I don't know, 4 out of 10 if I have to give it a score. Yeah, just bad. Skip it. Not worth money. If you can get it for free, I'd say maybe give it a play and really try to get through it as quickly as possible. But the game tries to force a minimum playtime out by having you fill up those bars before you can fight the bosses. So yeah, 4 out of 10, maybe 3 out of 10. Definitely not a 5. I would play Metal Gear Solid 5 again 100 times before I ever turn Far Cry 5 back on. So yeah, that's that. This didn't end up being a much shorter review. It's still like 54 minutes, and it was just less organized. So I don't think I'm going to do any more short reviews. I think I'm going to do more organized reviews that way. I don't have to worry about being kind of all over the place like this one, because my notes were not put into order or organized like they normally are. So everything kind of it jumped around a lot. But yeah, we won't do that again. It's fine. Anyway, if you made it all the way to the end of the video, like and subscribe, check out the Patreon, all that kind of bullshit. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you on the next one.